Okay. Hello, everyone. This is very exciting because this is my very first podcast. And I'm so lucky today to be joined by the writers and stars of Interstate, which is a new musical which is currently showing at the East West Theatre in Los Angeles, which is where I am right now. You can tell by the blurred curtains behind me. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm just going to read a little bit from the press release so that everybody gets to know a little bit about what Interstate's about, and then I'll get all of my guests to introduce themselves. So this is from the press release. It says, Interstate is the touching story about how two transgender people at different stages of their journey navigate love, family, masculinity, and finding a community in the era of social media. It tells two stories that eventually intersect. Fueled by the allure of fame and a desire to connect with their community, Dash and Adrian embark on a road trip across America for their first national tour. Their fiercely political and deeply personal music touches Henry, a transgender teenage boy living in a small town in middle America, and he finds solace in their art as he struggles with his own identity and family. After blogging about the band and documenting his own gender journey, Henry decides to set out on a quest to meet his heroes in person, hoping to find answers to his own struggles. Marvelous. So I'm going to get everybody to introduce themselves and say how they fit in to that story. So let's start with Melissa, if that's okay.
Yeah, my name is Melissa Lee. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am one of the creators of Interstate. I co-write book with my writing partner Kit Yan, and lyrics as well. And I'm the composer of the musical.
Thanks, Melissa. Lovely. And Kit?
Hi, James. My name is Kit. I use they, he, and she pronouns. I'm one of the co-creators of Interstate, splitting book and lyrics with Melissa, and I'm super excited to be here.
Hooray! And Jaya?
Hello, I'm Jaya Joshi. I play Henry in Interstate, and I use they pronouns primarily, but because I play a lot of characters who use different pronouns than that, like I'm putting on and taking off identities all the time, so I tend to say I use all pronouns.
Thank you so much. Lovely. And Jupiter?
I'm Jupy. I'm Jupiter Lay. I play Dash. And I use the he, him, his pronouns. So happy to be here. I'm so excited. Oh man, yeah.
This is one of the most exciting podcasts and interviews that I've ever done because I love Interstate so much. I first discovered it, I think it was on a website called ringofkeys.org, which is an organization in New York, which is quite a random way to come about it really, but I discovered Melissa and Kit's work there, and I have been following Interstates ever since, showing it to my students and talking to anybody that will listen to it about the show. So what I thought I'd do, we'll just see how things go, and feel free to chip in as you want to as we go. But I wanted to start off, because this whole podcast series is about representation. I wanted to start by talking about the idea of heroes, which is quite central to Interstate. And I was going to ask you to maybe talk about people that are particular heroes to you, whether that's within theatre or whether that's more generally, and thinking a little bit about who has shaped the way that you are. It's quite a big question to start with, isn't it?
It's a beautiful question. Beautiful. I can't start because I'm thinking about how beautiful that question is. That's so pretty. Oh man. It just takes me back to, like, when you're younger and they're like, who's your role model? Who do you look up to? And a lot of times, I feel like as I'm getting older, I feel like I'm my own role model, because you kind of have to pave your own way in the world, and you're like, there's no one who looks at me but looks like me. And then you get into this musical and you're like, oh my god, there's plenty of people who look like me. And so I think I can just answer it. I used to think I had to focus all of my role models into the soul person. Like I always thought it would be like an Obama or like somebody just a figure. And then I realized all the role models are all the queer people around me, all the queer, trans, people of color, just all around me. And you're like, oh my god, I like you, and I like this part of you, I like this, and we're all together. So I think it's really, I find my leadership in our community and how we hold each other. It's all about the bonds, and that keeps me going. So that's the model that I want to preserve, and I just love, and that we have.
Thank you so much for that. I think that's one of the really big things, actually. One of the things I've been finding as I go through this is people often talk about first of all, the idea of their having their own, being their own role model and having to find their own way because the representation wasn't there. But I think also this idea about how people want to fit us into boxes. And so if you are in the gay box, you can't also be in the Asian box, and you can't also be in the disabled box, and all this sort of thing. And I think this idea of community is so important. Let's get somebody else to talk. Shush me now. Let's have somebody else talking.
I remember, like, thinking back, I constantly now playing a 16-year-old, like all I do is think about what it was like to be 16 and like, God, what did I think? Like, what was going on with me then? Because I was out as queer tentatively, but I was almost completely closeted and like just ignoring what was going on inside me. So I knew that I didn't see what I needed to see around me. I knew that nothing looked like me, but I didn't know what I was looking for. So I didn't really know where to look. But I remember seeing the movie version of Rocky Horror Picture Show and seeing Tim Curry in that movie and feeling like that's something. Like whatever is going on with this person is sort of right. Like, I get that we both have curly hair. We both look like that when we try to wear makeup and heels, but we still like it. Like, just seeing somebody twisting it all up, not trying to show you something that you already had a script for how to process, felt very awakening. And then I only felt further awakened when a friend told me that he then went into hiding. After Tim Curry played that role, he disappeared because the response was so intense that he was kind of in shock and ashamed. Even though he had created this thing that like clearly is so beautiful and so like inspiring to me, inspiring to many, but like retrospectively, it makes complete sense that I saw myself in that. But at the time it was like, I guess I'm just really weird, maybe. But
no, that's amazing. I think gender, and particularly non-binary gender, is something that would be lovely to talk about today as well, because it's made such a big difference. And I feel like musical theatre is just about to start to get the hang of this now. But it's been a long time coming. But thank you for that. Melissa and Kit, I'm fascinated to know who kind of influenced you or who you looked up to.
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, I did want to just add, I guess, echo sort of what Jupiter was saying about like that it's not one specific person. I think like I was asked this when I was younger too. I had to make a presentation in high school about like my heroes, and I really was struggling. I think because at that time I was also thinking about how like flawed individual people could be. So I think like Jupiter saying, like, sometimes you think it has to be like a figure or a person who's just perfect, but I actually think that heroes can also be people that are imperfect, and that's sort of a theme that we have in our show as well, right? Like, you know, Dash's dad is his hero, and of course like leads him down some problematic paths, but at the same time is still kind of like an amazing person. And so there's complexity there. I didn't answer your question, James, because I still don't know who my heroes are. Sorry, I have some sunscreen in my eyes and it looks like I'm crying. Literally, I have some sunscreen in my eyes. But yeah, like I don't really actually know. It's something I'm still trying to figure out. But I think the closest is just thinking again about what Jupiter said. Like, I think it's about communities of people versus any individual. Think about our queer elders and people in our own communities that have paved the way for us to be here today.
Absolutely. Thank you. Kit?
Yeah, I'd love to actually jump in and talk about the show a little bit. Because in our show, Henry really looks up to Dash, and the show is set in 2008. And 2008 is the year that Melissa and I got in our car and drove around the country looking for more people like ourselves, because we hadn't found enough people like ourselves. And we just wanted to hear people's stories and meet people and see the country, and so and find our folks. And so in Interstate, the band Queer Malady goes on a journey just like we did, and they are putting themselves out there. They're putting their work out there. And because of that, somebody, Henry, it looks up to them and finds their work and has never seen anybody else like himself. And so therefore wants to consume all of their content, go to their show and that sort of thing. And that is very reflective of the times that we were touring in 2008. I think when you, just similarly to what a lot of people here said, when there isn't a ton of representation out there, you're sort of just kind of looking for whatever you can get. And so that's certainly like a part of the show, and then a part of our lives. Like for me, when I was coming into my queer and trans identity, I was 18, 19 years old. I was in Boston, very far from home. I grew up in Hawaii, and so I was trying to figure out who I was. I went to the school nurse to ask her, like, I have this feeling inside me, what can I do about that? And then she was like, I don't really know, but I'm gonna go ask a friend of a friend. And then I started going to this really beautiful thing called Gender Crash. It was in Jamaica Plains. It was of these times, the 2002, 2003 to 2008 times. And there were a lot of like queer and trans people there of all identities and expressions. There were a lot of older folks, older than me by a couple of decades, who I really looked towards. I didn't quite see anybody exactly like me, but it was still very hopeful to hear older queer folks just talk about who they are. It was like an open mic, but you didn't really have to bring a piece of art. You could like stand up there and just like rant, read your Craigslist ads, talk about your day, really just do whatever. And so because it was like that, people were just speaking very personally. And I just will never forget that was a space, and that was my very first entry point to this beautiful queer world, was a space where people just were really free to be themselves and express themselves however they wanted to.
That's so lovely, and something that comes across, I think, so much in Interstate as well, is that the idea about using art to kind of find more out about yourself, I suppose. I apologize for the fact that I currently have several aeroplanes going past me. I don't know why that has happened. Yeah, I was going to ask about a little bit about that as well, and this idea about how your art helps you to express yourself, and perhaps whether that's through playing other characters, or whether that's through songwriting, or spoken word, or art, or anything else that you do. What do you do to kind of express your identity? How does that kind of work for you?
James, I feel like you're quoting the show, and you haven't even like. I mean, there's a line of like push our activism through art, and I just thought you were just gonna start singing the lyrics. And I was like, are you sure you didn't come earlier? It's so wild. I wasn't. I just chat. I wasn't ready to answer the question. I know I have a specific memory of. I mean, it was like a life memory of really. My art came before my identity. So it was, when I was younger, I was really kind of like the outcast. I was really small, and I felt really like, fragile, and I was kind of like I wasn't somebody to be seen, but it was in the way that I like started off playing piano, and then the ook and the guitar, and it was through that where there was moments where I can gather like 30 plus 100 plus people to sing songs together, but they didn't see me, but that was a kind of a compromise where if they can't see me or my gender identity, or they can't perceive me the way that I want to be perceived, they can perceive me the way that I play music. I want them to see the way I play music, and focus on my ability to create music and create space rather than me. So I guess that was kind of my gateway to my own expression, in terms of like, this is a part of me, but I didn't know who I was. Like, I didn't know that I wanted to be who I am today. And so it's I would say that music and art, it serves as that vessel, as that bridge, to really express myself in the way that I didn't know that was possible, which is like, like people are always like, art is so like art is me. I'm art, or this is the best way to express myself. But I really think about that bridge of, if it weren't for art, I wouldn't be been able, I would not have been able to open myself up in a way, because I didn't want to be seen, you know. But because I was seen for my music, because I was seen for my art, then I was able to be like, okay, people want to see me, so I can choose to be seen for me. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's really. Do you still have things that you write now? Do you have like have you got songs out there or that kind
Oh
of thing?
gosh, I'm so baby. Oh my god, is that, do I have to define baby in this? I'm so baby. I mean, what do I have? I have like clips of performances online, but it was really my art's very personal, and I share
Mm.
it with my local communities. Like, I'm from Boston, so it's like people from Boston know my stuff. So, but I always do it. It's just always space oriented. It's never like I put out a song. It's always, okay, I have this group of people and we created this moment and we all sang like Adele together or something like, and that's an iconic moment we recall. And that's so yeah, I like creating moments over stuff.
Mm.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. Somebody else?
I'll try it. I think I I have a lot in common with that feeling of thinking like you get to a point where people can see what you're making, but they can't see you. That is super familiar. I think everybody in my family can sing. I was always encouraged to sing. They were very supportive of anything that I wanted to do. And that was one of the things that I wanted to do. And it felt at first like I didn't know what I was really pushing back against, but I felt like I had to stick a flag in the ground of, like, at the time, the only language I had for it was like, I need, like, it's not fair that girls who are pretty get to be seen for their voice. If I can sing better than they can, maybe I could be seen. Like, just wanting to show up and be there and be like, no, like, I have something. Like, everybody isn't going to just like I felt so pushed out. I didn't feel like I could find a group socially. I felt like the Indian community thought that I was too white, and the white community was like, we don't even want to touch that. And the gay communities were like, you dress wrong. So I didn't I felt like I had to like ice pick my way in by just like, for so long, all I thought about was like, I'm not going to be difficult. I'm not going to cause any problems. I'm not going to give anybody a reason to not let me be in a room. So all I did was focus on getting better. And then when it got to the point that like I was working for this thing that I cared about so much, but doing it was so painful because doing it involves somebody else evaluating you and then telling you what kind of woman you seem like, if you seem like a woman to them. And if seeming like a woman is painful for you, then you're going to find out, but you might not be sure where it's coming from. So I spent a lot of time kind of with interplay between like how much I was comfortable with everybody understanding my identity, how much I wanted to share. And post pandemic, especially, I have been just coming into rooms and being like, yeah, this is who I am. These are my pronouns. Like, it really is. I thought I could get through my life wearing dresses and playing women and having everybody think that that continued off stage with me. Like, I thought that I could make that work. And maybe I could make that work, but I'm realizing, because of many, many positive experiences, specifically because of a production of cabaret that I did that was intended to be mostly, if not all, queer and trans people, which it was, where this like very well-intentioned cis white gay guy director opened up the space and was like, we want to know what a queer utopia would look like, and we want you guys to build it. Like, we're going to try to get it right. We're here to learn from you too. And a lot of people in that cast, like, it was everybody's identities expanded just because it was the only time that we all were brought together, like, with the purpose of just understanding ourselves and helping other people to understand us. Like, it was like a 6-week engagement that left a whole bunch of us being like, oh God, I need to pursue gender transition, just because the space was made
Wow.
for us to talk to each other. So I have no idea what I would know if I wasn't making art, even though like I like to keep my identity close to my chest. Like I'm shy. I'm starting to be okay with sharing it with other people and being like even if I could hide it, I'm not in danger. Like I don't need to.
That's so beautiful. It's thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, it's lovely. I'm really interested, Kit, I was particularly interested to talk to you about spoken word, if that would be okay, and poetry, because I think this is one of the first musicals that has incorporated this in. Certainly of the musicals I've looked at for the book, I think this is the only one that incorporates spoken word as well. So
It's a very niche world of spoken word.
Well, you sort of have, let's see, spoken word. So what I will say about spoken word is that it is from a time, it is very 90s, it is very 80s, 90s, 2000s, in terms of its like modern American form. But of course, it has roots and traditions in oral history that are far older than that. And spoken word is very, it's very personal. It's very confessional. It is very expressive in a raw state. And so because this show occurs in 2008 and because we are from that time as well, it was an art form that had a lot of people doing it during those times. I think what's really beautiful about I think creating any kind of art, spoken word, or even us creating this musical, and part of the reason why creating this musical is so important for us is that if we're not the folks who are going to write our own stories down via a poem, a song, or a musical, or a book, or a movie, then there isn't anybody else out there doing that for us. But sometimes there are, and they're often getting it wrong. And so it's really great for us as creators to be telling our own stories and telling stories from our communities and telling stories in collaboration with people in our communities, because then we get the opportunity to really reflect the truth and the joy and the struggles of our communities and our times. And for spoken word being in this show, it's really one device in terms of the language of the show. We've got musical theater song, we've got diegetic song, and then we've got spoken word in both musical theater, what would be in a musical theater song, or a diegetic song as well. So there's kind of a lot happening in the show, just if you're taking a look at like the form of it. And for Dash, in terms of his spoken word in the show too, it's an opportunity for him to, and just like it was for me, to figure himself out on stage, to bring what was in his journals and his like attempts to figure out who he is or how he's seeing the world, like onto the stage. And when I look back on my spoken word, I like really cringe. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I wrote that stuff. But then I have to meet the material where it's at. I have to like go back and say, okay, this is a time in my life when I was struggling or figuring this out or feeling joyous about this. And that is a beautiful time capsule that represents, rather than feeling like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. So yeah, that's a little bit about like our spoken word journey through this show. I'd be curious to know what you think, Melissa.
Well, as you were saying that, I was thinking about this question and the last question as well, where, I didn't have the same relationship to like discovering my queerness after the art. Like I came out when I was 11, and I didn't start writing music until I was 13. And so for me, music and my queerness are intricately tied because I didn't write anything that was not queer. I think, especially, I'm 13 years old, so I have a crush on someone, and then all of a sudden it's like my world, right? Like all songs is about this person, and they're awful, and they're like tragically horrible, these songs. So, I'm like it was for me, right? Yeah, at that time it was for me, and really trying to get through what it was that I was feeling and trying to figure out. And so for me it's intricately tied. But I thought of that too, Kit, when you were saying like, oh, I cringe at the thing, but you really have to honor the people that we were when we're young, right? Because it actually, in writing those bad things, it was integral to making us who we are today. So I just want to say that. But yeah, I mean, I think what is also great about spoken word in the show, despite me making fun of it all the time, I do think it's really such a huge part of this character's personality and how he expresses himself in a very unique way. I think, like, I don't know, I just think it also just makes this main character super interesting, that this is how he expresses himself, and he's so loud and bombastic, and he's out there saying all these things, and then meanwhile there's a second layer of he's struggling with all these things, right? Or, you know, how we all are when we sometimes, you know, there's like the artist as a character, and then like us as our inner selves. So I think that's just super interesting that we have that for that character.
It's so funny while you're talking, and all of you were speaking, then I was just thinking of various moments from the show which would link in so much to what you're saying, what you're talking about. It's really interesting talking about Dash and spoken word, and then kind of comparing that with the song "Loser Dumplings," which is probably one of my favorite songs ever in the whole world, because I play it. There's a lovely a cappella version online as well, but there's lots and lots of different recordings of it, and it's even playing it to a group of students in the UK. We all get it, the sort of why it's so important, and because it's so specific. I'd love to talk a little bit more about that moment in the show, actually, and that kind of song, and what that song means to the character, and how it works, if that would be okay.
It's my song. I gotta step up for Dash. Oh my goodness. I mean, it's a delight. I think everybody agrees it's a delight, and that's just the gift of the writers to be able to create it. It's such a delightful song, and it's stamped as a delightful song. I mean, I can give the synopsis of the scene, and it's just you know, his Dash's father says, you know, I want you to be happy, and I want you to get the girl you love, and that girl potentially, but he wholeheartedly believes it is Adrian, and he's like, go get her. You know, you've been with her for this long, and you know she's like you. She's Chinese. She works for us. She's perfect. You know, dream person. And Dash is just like in complete denial in the beginning, and I always wonder about that transition. It's like, what does Dad really say for him to be like, oh my God, I'm really in love? And it's because dad is a incredible chef. He puts in all the ingredients. He's like, she's this, she's that, she's then this. Why would she stay with you for this long if she didn't like you? But she just doesn't know. So you got to work harder, because she's clearly not going to do it. So you got to man up. You got to step in. You got to do the thing. And I think all of that language really gets to Dash, and he's like, oh my goodness, you're totally right, and you're my father. Of course I'm gonna believe you, and you know I'm gonna try this thing out. And you know, and you start to, I mean, it's a beautiful moment of, you know, you think you saw the signs with somebody, when they probably weren't there. You just made them up. So it's a beautiful song of complete imagination, unbridled imagination. It's not even supported by evidence sometimes. So you know, he goes in, I mean, I'm not gonna give you away with the scene for you, but you know, oh my gosh, he does. I mean, as we say it, as the kids say it, he does the most. He really comes up with the fact that she, you know, he was at a you know, poetry slam competition, and Adrian showed up, and when he loses, Adrian shows up with these dumplings, in which he calls loser dumplings. And you know, that could have been just an innocent moment of, you know, hey, I brought you a snack, like, you know, like well, let's go eat after, or she probably never did it, but he just goes into this major number of full imagination of that she really did love me from the beginning, and I knew it because she gave me these dumplings, and she was rooting for me, but she really loved me, and she's, you know, it's just a beautiful, it's so fun to just be in, because just to be in love, you know, to be in love and to feel like somebody you know, has seen you from the beginning, to make those dots when they probably don't connect. So but that's Dash, and by the end of it, no, I shouldn't share. But he really falls for it. He really falls for it, and he wholeheartily believes that he loves Adrian after in that moment.
Yeah. That was your audition song, Jupiter.
I know.
You auditioned with it.
It's a good song. It's a good song. Oh man, what a time.
I find Loser Dumplings to be a very complex moment, and Melissa, I think it'll be really fun to like talk about some of the greater themes of the show too, in terms of like in this moment, Dash has his dad's voice in his head, go get this girl, and he sings a song, and then he decides to go and confess his love for her, and he does try to go and enact the advice that dad gives him. And throughout the show, he's sort of like, it's simmering that he might do this, or it's simmering that somebody's encouraging him to do this. And one of the themes in the show that we try to tackle is really about queer friendships and queer love. And so in what's operating underneath this moment is this like very hetero patriarchal idea that one, you need a partner to navigate this world. Two, that partner needs to be a girl. And also that that if a man and a woman hang out, that has to be romantic. And so that's all kind of like simmering underneath this moment here. And we go on a journey through the end of the show where they navigate this feeling. Act 2 is really dramatic and all about the fallout from this moment. And so I don't know, Melissa and I, we often talk about the idea of like when we were figuring out our queer identities or creating queer friendships. Like there were many times I think in my life where I was hanging out with somebody super cool and queer, and I'm queer, and then all of a sudden I have these feelings for them, and it would get very murky, and it was not always in my mind that these feelings could be friendship. Because of all the things that we're operating under in society, those things I just named, in terms of like, you need a partner, you got to be man and woman, and man and woman can't hang out unless they're together, and like all those things are like simmering underneath. And so like I think now when I think about, oh gosh, this queer person is so cool, the idea that two people could really love each other and be friends, or the idea that people could love each other, be friends, and even build a family, or commit to each other for life, like those are all things I have come into, but not things that I previously knew. And I know, Melissa, you talk about it a lot.
We do talk about it a lot, because one of the things that we were asked, is as part of our journey of writing this, we were asked by our dramaturg, we were asked by our director several times, it's like, is Dash really in love with Adrian? And that's such seems to be kind of a simple question, but I think we're like, oh, we have to really think about this, right? And we also need to talk about what that means in queer friendships, exactly everything that Kit was saying. And I think for us, having been queer for so long, and just, we're older than you guys. But like, so for us, like, we've experienced so much. I think that we know, and that's part of our point of view coming into the story as well, that friendships are a spectrum. It's, if you're feeling romantic, that's possible, but it's also possible in a friendship, right? It's also, so I think that's what we were trying to explore also with Dash and Adrian Interstate.
It's so lovely to hear you talk about that. And one of the things I think musical theatre often does is it often tries to make everything into a binary, polarize things. You either feel love or you feel hate. It's all kind of like opposites. And one of the things that I love when we're talking about non-binary identities, it's something that I'm so interested in. And it's partly because of this idea that it lets things be nuanced, and it lets things be both or neither, and it lets things change over time, and all of that all of those things. Even though Interstate, I don't think necessarily has a character that you would that necessarily identifies themselves as non-binary. I feel like there's all these kind of non-binary principles are such an important part of it, and perhaps part of the queerness of the show as well. And the other moment I was going to talk about was the other. I'm talking about these songs deliberately because they're ones that are available for people to go and look at on YouTube. But I was going to talk a little bit about "I Don't Look," which is Henry's song, and again one of my favorite songs in that. And I'd love to know a little bit more about that song, because to me that's a song that's full of joy and tragedy at the same time, and I just love it. But I'd love to hear more about what you think of that.
Absolutely. That I think that also was one of my like audition material things that I was given. It was maybe like the first piece of material from the show that I interacted with, and obviously I was hooked. Like just the best, unbelievable, because like before you even like can think about what like the meat of the song is, you're just listening to it and you're like, I am dancing and having a great time. I can't believe how fun this song is. Like it, in the way that a great musical theater song can, it tricks you into just listening to it and not really like interrogating the lyrics. But it is really about like the weight that builds up on you when you are, it always like, I mean, it's a word with multiple meanings, but I think a lot about impotence, like about not being able to change things. Like there is a lot going on for Henry, for every teenager, that you like immovable objects all around you. You do not get to choose whether you go to school. You do not get to choose who you go to school with. You, depending on how cool your parents are, Henry's parents aren't very cool. You don't really get to choose what you wear. You don't really get to choose who you hang out with even. Like there is so little that you can do. And one of the only powers that Henry has is saying, okay, well, if you're going to be awful, I'm not going to look. Like if you are going to send me mean comments, I'm not going to look at it. If I think you might judge me, I'm not going to interact with you. Like it's a real like Shake It Off by Taylor Swift kind of song. Except for the bridge where Henry is talking to this girl who showed him more kindness than any other person in the show does, aside from, spoiler alert, never mind. But yeah, this girl who is like very cute in a very 2008 way takes the time to be like, stop disrespecting Henry's property. And that amount of affection is enough to get him hooked. And in this song, he allows himself in the bridge to think about what it might be like to open up to somebody. Like I have a whole section about like, the world is mean and cruel, and I feel it so intensely. I'm just 16, but I know when the odds are stacked against me. Like, I'm not an idiot. Just because I'm not looking at people bullying me doesn't mean that everybody around me doesn't somehow see me as a target, regardless of what I do. Like, Henry cannot materially change his life. He can only think about what it would be like if he had a girlfriend or a friend. And I mean, I could talk forever about it, but I think that feeling that he needs a woman to be like, oh, I'm like, it can kind of like jumpstart you into coming out or make you feel like you'd be brave enough to live a life that you're not living. Like, gosh, if I just had this perfect girlfriend, everybody would see me as a man. Or like, if I just had like a romance with a woman who really gets me and really listens to me, then I would grow up faster, or this would be more bearable. I'm gonna let somebody else talk about the song.
You know what you're saying, Jaya, that really is something that I think about a lot. And what's funny is like there's a parallel journey between Henry and Dash, right? Henry thinks, okay, if I get this girl, everything's gonna be better. And for Dash, Dad's telling him, okay, go get this girl and everything's gonna be better. And in some cases, like, I mean, and in a lot of times in life, that actually probably is true. Like,
Yeah.
when you have somebody who sees you for who you are and loves you and your queerness and your relationship is beautiful and queer and it's working and that is a very safe space for you, yeah, like it is. Like, is that the only path that is available in life? Absolutely not. But it is one that provides like all the joy and safety and comfort a person can have in this life, depending on, you know, where you're at in this in your lifetime and if those are your desires. And so it is interesting to think about, like, okay, well, Dash is on a journey where, okay, my best friend is, I have feelings, but they don't have to be romantic. And then Henry is looking for something to encapsulate his identity, like a space to encapsulate all of who he is that he can feel totally seen in.
Uh,
Yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry, kid. I just wanted to also just shout out to Jaya. I feel like Jaya, it's been so fun also watching you sing this song and what you bring to this character that, you know, we've never seen before, which is like, I feel like, especially with this song, like Henry is just such a fun kid to get to know, right? And that's part of your interpretation too, of like, I'm actually in control of my, you know, I'm mature enough that I'm in control of the things that I let bother me or not bother me, right? So there's that piece that makes the song so fun, but also of course your interpretation of it, and then the bridge of being like, you know, I'm still a young kid that's vulnerable, and here
Yeah.
so yeah, so just shout out on a fantastic performance of that.
Thank you so much. I feel like Henry's always looking for a win.
Yeah, we're really rooting for him. I totally echo Melissa's really like joy around your performance, and I want to swing this conversation back to the idea of like being non-binary, because
Hey.
yeah, because in this show, because it's set in 2008, in 2008 we're not using the language of non-binary. In 2008, the reason why I think the reason why Dash is the way he is, and Jupiter, I think you bring a really great performance to this in terms of the commitment to the masculinity that Dash is carrying through in 2008, is that in 2008, you had to be pretty binary. I think like the only messaging available in the media was like, you're a man or you're a woman, even if you decide to be trans. And
Yep.
so what we're really working against here is that idea that there is one way to do that. And Interstate is often a critique of binary transness in that way. It's a real critique on that time. And it's a critique, plus it's a hope. It's a hope that people be whoever they are. And if that is, if being like, I don't know, I hope the show says like you can be whoever you want to be. You can be a trans man if you want to be. Henry, at the end, there's a beautiful moment where he meets somebody that says, that meets him where he's at and is saying to him, like, I like you with or without tea. And I think for us, that's it's at the end of the show, but it's a little nugget into saying, into maybe the idea that like there is transness can exist however you want it to be. And in terms of like breaking the binary here too, where I think the show is trying to ask that question in multiple spheres, not only around gender, but around like life path. I don't know, Melissa, if you want to speak towards like some of the
Yeah, I always imagine that like
final stuff.
that after Henry gets there, you know, like what does Henry's life look like in 5-10 years, right? Like he might be exploring his gender further. I had a conversation recently. This is related, but I had a conversation recently with our gender consultant Josephine Kearns. Shout out Josie. And she was asking me, because you know we were doing casting for Henry, and she was asking, she's like, well, you know, like is Henry canonically non-binary? And I was like, you know, that's such a great question, and like you said, Kit, it really has to do with, well, I don't know, like I can't even define that for Henry. Like I can't even say like, yes, like Henry is canonically, you know, non-binary, except living in 2008. We don't really know, and it's sort of open-ended, and I think that's probably why so many non-binary folks like really relate to the character of Henry, because it's just a kid who's figuring things out, and I think that's just an important story to tell.
Absolutely. I think it's that's lovely. Thank you very much, because I think one of the most difficult things with theatre is when you're setting something which is in kind of the quite recent past, and it can be quite tricky to kind of locate your audience in something that is part in the past, but it's only is the distance is much smaller to travel than, say, setting something in the 1950s. And again, now hearing you all talk about this, I realize this is one of the things that I've always loved about Interstate, but never really been able to articulate, is the fact that it challenges so many normatives, and I think particularly among them the idea of the binary system as well. We're coming to the end of our time, but I was going to just finish off by asking you a little bit about the experience of producing Interstate with the East West players, isn't it? And thinking perhaps what you will take away from this particular production of Interstate. So I'd like to ask that to everyone in turn, if that would be okay to finish off. Jupiter, do you want to start?
Oh yeah, I knew you were gonna figure. Oh man, you're so silly. Oh man, what a major! I've been thinking about that a lot. Because I get a lot of questions. I've asked myself since the beginning of how does it feel to do the role and to be in a musical like this, and to tell this tale and to tell the story like this on this stage, on the East West Players stage, and the premier theater, the longest running company, empowering Asian American stories. And so to find myself at those intersections and to be in that stage and to be in the role, oh my God, I think every day I'm awakening to how jumping into the role and telling the story, it feels really easy. It feels like you have this really safe community, safe, brave community who also say yes to the story and when trans cis, people of color, non-people, we're all saying yes, we want to tell the story, we're going to do it together, we're going to do it on the stage, and it's a beautiful thing. And so it almost starts off innocent. You're like, oh, yeah, we're just telling the story, and we know what the story is, and it's really revolutionary. But to tell the story, you're like, oh, it's just a story. I have this unrequited love. Oh, is it unrequited? I don't know. You got to figure it out. And then and you see this kid, small town kid, figure out life, and it just feels like, oh, small town boy, and it feels really innocent. And then every day, now that we're in performances, you see people come out and they're like, this changed my life. Like, you see the responses and you're like, wow, this is so amazing to see on stage. And I'm like, yeah, it is amazing to see on stage, just because we're not the ones sitting in the audience, so it just feels like we're just telling the story. But I've just been awakened to how lucky I am, and I just know after this production I'm gonna like cry, because the night you realize I took the role for granted. You're just like, well, you get back to regular musicals and regular stories, and you're like, wow, this is all kind of boring. This is not as exciting as this story. No shade to other stories there, but you just realize that what a gift to be. Everybody wants to play a human being on stage. You don't want to be this kind of caricature. You don't want to be the bad guy. You don't want to be the good guy. You don't want to be the bad. Those things. But to just live life on stage as me, and it's just been to mirror that, to do that for myself, to have a good time for myself, and to feel all the emotions, and then embody that experience for somebody else, for the audience. It's just been an honor, and I think it's a gift. It's a gift that keeps on giving. The more we stay with the story, it's just a wonderful time.
Thank you so much. Jaya, do you want to jump in there?
Sure. It's been so I love working on anything that's any stage of new. I love working on something that's still alive in some aspect. And Interstate, even though the writers, like, things that changed, I don't know the whole history, but we didn't get a ton of rewrites during the process. We got a steady amount, but it was not, comparatively, I didn't think it was crazy. Like, it was definitely healthy, but it's so close to being like this pristine finished thing, and it's crazy to like be here for the final moments of that, especially like knowing how much it means to people, like that it just was this version, like this specific version with these people, with these rewrites, this time in LA, in this place at East West Players. Also just like such a delight to be put up by an Asian American theater, not just a queer theater, but to have it be brought to, especially something like this where people have like season tickets, they come back over and over again regardless of what's playing, to have them come to see this when they could have chosen anything and they chose this show. And yeah, I'm really excited to be any part of sharing it with people. Like, I know that this is what, like when I was Henry's age, I needed this show. Like, it's tacky to say that, but it's frankly true. So I must.
Me too.
Like, I could have saved myself a lot of time if this had already existed. And this show is not always easy for me. Usually I'm playing a woman, so there's this huge buffer between who I think I am at home and who everybody is experiencing on stage. But in this show, like, not only is it just like me, I don't know what the end game of Jaya's gender in life is. Henry doesn't know what the end game of Henry's gender is. And in this show, I'm constantly like taking my shirt off and taking my pants off. Like, people see more of me in a non-sexual way, but it's still extremely intimate, if not like even a sex scene. I feel like I can put up a wall between that. But with this, just like regular life stuff, regular trans stuff feels so vulnerable, and like what a like hedonistic opportunity for me to like get to learn about all these parts of myself, to get to not just play a man, but a trans man. Like, I mean, it's great for everybody else who gets to see it because the show's awesome, but it's incredible for me to actually like learn, like receive information back from a production that I'm doing, as opposed to just putting my energy into something.
Kit, thanks, Jaya.
Couldn't have said it any better than Jupiter and Jaya just did.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, I think overall doing it here at this time at East West Players really was a blessing for us in our like writing process, and really getting further and being able to make changes. Like Jaya said, there wasn't a whole lot of them because there was a long history of working on the show, but we did do some significant stuff, and that we hadn't worked on before. So really just grateful for the opportunity and to get to meet these fantastic actors that we didn't know before. Now we know and have worked with y'all, and you're amazing. So yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, everybody. Interstate is still running at the East West Players at the David Henry Hwang Theatre. I think there's 4 more performances left, 1 tonight, 2 on Saturday, and 1 on Sunday. And if you have time, if this gets out in time and you have time and you're in Los Angeles, please do go and see it. But I would love to say thank you to Melissa, Kit, Jaya and Jupiter for taking part in this. And thanks very much to everybody for listening. Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Thank you, James.
Thank you so much.